I'm going to make a tenon cutter to match the taper on this reamer here. I made this in my last video. This is for a reamer that I made a few years ago and the taper's different, so I need one to match this one. The tenon cutter has an obvious weak point just here, so it needs to be made from a strong hardwood. I'm going to use this spotted gum, and for the blade I'm going to use this spoke-shaped blade. And it's a little bit wider than this piece I've got here, so I'm going to glue another piece to the center, and that's just for the main part of the body, because the outside bits are going to be turned down to handles. I need to mark the centers, and because I glued that piece on the side, this is off center now, so I've got a piece the same thickness as that, and I'll just clamp that in place so I can mark the center. I'm going to turn the handles down, but I will remove some of the material with the bandsaw first, so I'll just mark those lines out. I've made the marks for the handles, but before I cut them or turn them on the lathe, I'm going to concentrate on this hole here. So I'm going to mark the center, drill the hole, taper it, and then from that point I can make the marks for these cuts that need to be made here, and that will be easier to do now. This is the reason why I made the reamer first, because we need the reamer to be able to make the tenon cutter. So now I'm going to put a taper into this hole. It's not really meant for cutting timber as dense as this, but it will do it if you take it easy and don't force it. Keep checking in each direction that you're going through square. It will go off square if you don't pay attention to it. I should have marked the centre line all the way around earlier, but I can still do that. I can still find the centre, so I'll just mark the centre there. I've got my cheap bevel gauge set to 20 degrees, and I'm going to make a mark from where the centre line touches the hole here and make a line across, and then flip it over and do the opposite on the other side. So again, at this point here where the centre line meets the top of the hole, I'm not going to make those cuts now. I just wanted to lay out those lines before I go ahead and start shaping it and cutting the handles. I rounded the corners of the body over, and you don't need to do that, but because I've done that, I've ended up taking off this line here, and I need that to meet this face. So I'm just going to have to get right above it and eyeball that line along there and try and keep it in the right place. Actually, that doesn't look quite right. Let's have another go at that. And that looks better. And I need to do that on the other side as well. I need to join the two lines together across this face now, and I've put it in the vise to make that a little bit easier. As you can probably see, that line is tapered, and that's because it follows the taper of the tapered hole. Now that we've marked out where we need to cut to make a bed for the blade to sit on, we also need to remove this whole section here. We won't make the cut right on the centre line. It will need a little bit of clearance, so I'm going to come over around about 5mm. This cut is a compound angle. It's got an angle across this way here plus an angle down, but if you take your time and follow the line, you should get it right. I made an adjustment while making this cut, and because of that the bed isn't quite flat, so I need to address that. And you can see the taper here, that there's a little bit left on there, and that's because it's a high spot. So I'm just going to take this corner down and try and get this level. I'm just going to pair it with a chisel. Before fitting the blade, I'm going to round this corner over here. As it is, it will be quite an aggressive cut on that corner, and it'll have a tendency to tear into the workpiece, where hopefully if I round it over, it'll ease into that cut. Because I've rounded off the corner of the blade, I'm going to match it by rounding over the opening to the larger side of the taper. You can either turn your dowel into the tenon cutter or put the dowel in the vise and turn the tenon cutter with it, or even put the tenon cutter in the vise and turn the dowel. I'm not sure what kind of wood this is. All I can tell you is it is very hard. And there we have it. The one thing I haven't mentioned is this tenon cutter will only make tenons of this size. If we want to make a larger tenon, then we have to make a separate tenon cutter. I've removed the blades here so I can show you. We're using that section there of the reamer, but the reamer will actually make a much wider tenon as well. I'm going to make a second tenon cutter. It'll be no frills, nothing fancy, and it should only take about 20 minutes to make. I'm going to use a sole plane iron for the blade, and I've put a couple of pencil marks on the reamer for the size tenon that I want to make. So I need to take a measurement of the narrowest point, and that is 28 millimeters. I've just marked off a 20-degree angle, and that's for the plane iron to sit on. I'm not sure what this wood is. It's very hard, and hopefully I can make it work, but we'll see how we go. The plane iron needs enough room to put a couple of fixings in if you're using a plane iron, because I think one, it may want to pivot because it's a long way from the edge. With the other one that I made, I only put one screw in there and that holds it fine because I can get a fixing further down. So I need to put that in about the right position, and with my forcing a bit, I've already done it actually, but somewhere near the line there, and like I say, with enough room to fix the plane iron up there, and make the mark, and we can drill that out. I might not have this line in exactly the right place. I'll drill the hole. I can always sand that out and remake that line, but that's given me a starting position to drill this hole. I've just had a better look at the end grain, and I'm pretty sure it's Jarrah, but I may be wrong. This side here needs to be the larger side of the taper, so I do need to sand this line out and remake that after I've made the taper. Probably not the best choice of wood, but I did it and I managed. I've marked this out exactly the same way as the other one. I've got a 20-degree angle there to the centre line. I need to do exactly the same on the back. 5mm over again. And then the last thing is to join these marks here up. I made a bit of a pig's ear of that, but I got there in the end. It wasn't an easy cut to make, trying to come 20 degrees off the face there. But what I should have probably done is just reduce the size of the block and just cut that down on the miter saw, and then I would have been starting on the end here, and there would have been enough room to do that. So that was what I should have done. The blade didn't bed on there well at all because I made so many adjustments and it was all over the place, but I just took the high spots off with the chisel and then I just finished it off with a sanding block, and that's got it now. I've just quickly turned this on the lathe and I believe it's white mahogany, but I may be wrong, but we'll give that a go. It's hardwood anyway. So there we have it. It works very, very well. I haven't rounded off the corner of the blade, and you don't have to do that, but if you want to put a tenon on a piece of stock that's wider than the widest part of the tenon, first of all you have to shave down the end of the piece of stock so it can start. So I've done that with a draw knife, but what will happen is it will start tearing where it enters the blade, and it can make a little bit of a mess. And what you do have to do anyway is you have to keep going back with the draw knife and take a bit more off and a bit more off, but you can see how it makes a bit of a mess there. So the idea of rounding the blade over is to help with that a little. It probably won't make that much difference, so it's not something that's essential. It's a really strong joint, just as it is without any glue. I'm going to glue it in, and I've just cut a curve in there, and I'm going to wedge it as well. And there's no real reason to do that other than I think it looks nice, and that's why I'm going to do it. I just want to see how it comes out. That came out really nice for a quick and rushed demo. The glue is still wet. I didn't wait for that to dry. It only had one coat of wax just to give an idea what it looks like, and it's pretty nice. It's not even square. Like I say, I did rush it, but it gives an idea of what it can do, and it's a very strong joint. I can't grip it that well with this hand at the moment, but believe me, it's a very, very strong joint. The tenon cutters turned out great. This one here was a lot easier to make than that. When I say a lot easier, there's not that much difference between the two, but you don't have to go through the process of turning the handles. I suppose you could actually just make the block, and you could put handles and you could drill into it and set handles in, but they don't actually need the handles. I use this one in the demo, and you just turn the dowel into it. It works pretty well like a pencil sharpener. This one here was a bit bigger. What you could do, actually, I'll just grab it. When I'm making my wooden threads, I use this thing here and I just clamp that up around the dowel, and that works really well. So if you build one like this and you struggle to turn the dowel, then you could always make something like that to clamp to it and turn the dowels that way. but it was actually pretty easy to turn, and my hand's not the best at the moment either, and I managed. So even with the bigger dowel, I think this is fine, this works good, so there's no real reason to do that. It does look nice, I suppose. If you didn't see my last video, I made this reamer, and you will need the reamer to be able to make these tenon cutters. Hopefully that was helpful to somebody. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.